When you're setting up a new protocol and the shaker sits at the top of your wish list, it's easy to feel a little stuck between, I need something reliable, and I don't want to waste money on a piece of equipment that ends up gathering dust. That hesitation is what most of us in the lab feel before we click Add to Cart. I'm going to walk through exactly what the Heidolph Reax Vibrating Test Tube Shaker does in a day-to-day setting, where its value really shows up, and whether it's the right fit for the kind of work you do. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First, let's talk about the kind of workflow that makes a shaker like this indispensable. If you regularly work with viscous media, think polymer solutions, cell suspensions, or enzymatic reactions that need a gentle but consistent mixing, having a device that can keep 10 to 16 tubes moving without you hovering over them is a massive time saver. The Reax's carousel holds up to 26 tubes, so you can run several parallel experiments in one go. That's a real advantage when you're optimizing a series of concentrations or temperature points and you can't afford to start and stop each tube manually. Conversely, if you only ever run a couple of samples at a time, the extra capacity could feel like unused space, and a smaller, less expensive rocker might be sufficient. What really sets this unit apart is the continuously adjustable electronic speed range from 150 up to 2,000 revolutions per minute. In practice, that means you can dial in a slow tumble for delicate cell cultures that might shear at higher speeds, then crank it up for a quick dispersion of a thick polymer paste. I've seen users in a biotech startup use the low end to keep a fragile yeast culture alive for overnight incubations, then switch to the high end when they need a rapid homogenization before a downstream assay. The 3 mm vibration orbit also creates a gentle, rocking motion that's more effective than a simple orbital shaker for large diameter vessels. In real lab terms, that translates to fewer clumps in viscous solutions and a more uniform reaction across the tube length. The built-in timer is another practical feature that often gets overlooked in spec sheets. You can set it from 1 to 999 minutes, which means you can launch a 12-hour incubation and walk away, confident the shaker will stop exactly when you need it to. That unattended operation is a real workflow enhancer for labs that run 24-hour experiments. Imagine you're running a time course assay that requires shaking every hour for the first 6 hours and then a steady mix for the remainder. You can program the timer once, let the shaker do the work, and come back to a set of perfectly mixed samples. No need to check a stopwatch every 10 minutes. Now, every piece of equipment has its trade-offs, and the Reax is no exception. The unit sits on a benchtop, and because it's built to handle a full carousel of tubes, it's larger than a single tube rocker you might have on a cramped shelf. If your lab space is at a premium, you'll need to account for the footprint. The price point is also higher than entry-level shakers, which makes sense given the electronic speed control and timer, but it's something to weigh against your budget if you're a teaching lab or a startup with limited capital. Noise isn't mentioned in the specs, but in real-world use, a vibrating shaker can generate a low hum that becomes noticeable during quiet analytical work. Most users find it tolerable, yet if you're in a shared space where sound is a concern, you might want to test it first or consider placing it on an anti-vibration mat. So who should walk away with this shaker? If you're running multiple parallel experiments that involve viscous or semi-solid media, need precise speed adjustments, and appreciate the safety net of an automatic timer, the Heidolph Reax offers a blend of capacity and control that's hard to match in its class. It's especially valuable for research groups that push the limits of mixing polymer chemists, cell culture facilities, and process development labs. On the other hand, if your work is limited to a handful of low-viscosity samples, or you're operating on a shoestring budget, a simpler orbital shaker or a basic rocking platform will likely meet your needs without the extra footprint and cost. All things considered, the strengths of this shaker lie in its flexibility, continuous speed control, sizable carousel, and long-duration timer, all of which address the everyday frustrations of stopping and starting mixing steps manually. The weaknesses are mostly about size, price, and a modest noise level that may not suit ultra-quiet environments. If those trade-offs line up with your lab's priorities, you'll find the Heidolph Reax paying for itself in saved hands-on time and more reproducible results. If they don't, there are cheaper alternatives that can still get the job done. If you think the Reax fits the picture you have for your bench, take a look at the details and see whether